and moved passwords over and that sort of thing. I know that you said that may not be something that applies to you, but at least we'll see it in passing here. So with the Identity Synchronizer Management Studio, what it amounts to is there is a small on-premise component, as Marty pointed out, that needs to be installed on a server somewhere in your environment. What that piece does is it's constantly polling your Active Directory and polling up to Autotask, and it's synchronizing the components between the two so that you have the same contacts with the same metadata up in Autotask as you would normally see in the Active Directory environment, based on those users that you've selected to be Autotask contacts, and we'll show you how that works. But to start with, I'll talk to you a little bit about the Management Studio. It's just basically an interface for setting up configuration data and monitoring what's going on. So the configuration data is pretty easy. First thing, as Marty mentioned, we use either Microsoft SQL or Microsoft SQL Server Express as kind of the back end of this to store all of our data. Again, it's not a very big thing. Normally, our database is only a couple hundred meg in size, so it's a pretty small database, but we do need to have a place to store all of our settings as well as all the users and metadata that we are syncing so that we can keep that data up to date in the Autotask system. So we have some basic database information we collect. We also collect some basic information on how to talk to your Autotask instance. So we need the API user and password. We also need to know what company or companies you want us to post to. So if you have multiple companies that you post into in Autotask, we can set up multiple companies to post to based on different criteria. But basically, we got to get that basic information in here. Then we have to know how you want us to set up the account IDs if we're setting up client portal user accounts for your users in addition to contacts. Then we need to know, are you going to use UPN, email, or SAM account as the account name for that client portal user. In my case, I'm using UPN. I like UPN because you always have UPNs, and they're generally unique so that you won't run into conflicts across or between different customers. But email and SAM account are also available. So that's basically it. Here we also need some AD credentials so that we can talk to AD and find out who the users are and be able to tell when user groups are being added or removed and that sort of thing. So that's basic configuration. Then we go into Metadata Sync, which I think is something that Marty mentioned. He had a similar screen. We can go in and pick which fields we want to have go between Active Directory and the Autotask system. Any of these are kind of standard fields that are built into Autotask and display in the main Autotask system. So they're pretty easy for us to map to. These by default are set up to be unidirectional, which means that we go from the Active Directory system over to Autotask, and we don't allow Autotask to change Active Directory. We do have the option, if you were to want to, we can allow Autotask to write that information back into Active Directory when things change in Autotask. So we do have an optional bidirectional flag, but I think most of our customers have said we want we want Active Directory to be authoritative at all times. We don't want external systems touching it, and so by default we have that turned off. If you do like the idea of being able to change those things, the convenience of changing those pieces of data up through the Autotask portal, then you can just turn that on, and then there's like 1 or 2 extra steps that have to go into place in order to make that work. So I've added a couple fields here, so I'm going to go ahead and apply those changes just so that it will be able to bring these across as we create some users. We also have another section here called UDF mapping. I want to talk about UDF mapping because this is something that Marty didn't have any slides to show you because we don't have this feature on ConnectWise, but we do have it on Autotask. In Autotask, we have the ability to bring back all the user-defined fields that are related to a contact record, and we can map any of these user-defined fields to any Active Directory field that is in the Active Directory schema and assigned to a user type object. So this would be all your standard fields as well as any extended schema fields. So you pretty much makes it so that you have limitless capability of taking data from Active Directory and syncing it over to the user record in Autotask. Your only limitation is the number of UDF fields that you can assign to a user object or a contact record in Autotask. I think it's like 128 or something like that. So, as I said, we can map any number of these different source fields to the different user-defined fields that are in the Autotask system. So for right now, I just have this one. I have department mapped to department because they're similar fields, and so it might be useful to be able to bring that information over to the Autotask system. So that's UDF mapping. Next thing I want to do is I want to talk about a tool that will be helpful for onboarding. I think one of the things that you mentioned was that you already have a bunch of contacts out there in Autotask. Again, one of the purposes of our system is not just to create the contact initially, but also to keep those contacts up to date, meaning if they get disabled over on deleted or disabled on the Active Directory side, we want that contact to then be disabled over on Autotask. Or if you change a phone number in Active Directory, we want that phone number to display over on Autotask. So we link these users up. We make users have a permanent relationship between the Active Directory environment and the Autotask environment so that that information is always flowing anytime something gets updated over on Active Directory. So if you already have a bunch of users in Autotask, one of the first things you'll want to do is you'll want to link those up to your Active Directory environment. So we provide this tool called bulk link, which lets us go out and pick up all of our users from Active Directory. So I'm going to just grab a couple OUs here to do mapping on, just so that we can have something to compare against. So I'm going to grab a couple of my OUs on Active Directory. Over on the other side of the screen, you'll see that there is a list of users. I'll actually make this a little bigger so we can see them. A bunch of users that are already in the Autotask system. We brought all those contacts back from Autotask. We want to map them. We want to find any matches that occur on each side. We can match on any number of different fields. We have first name, last name, network login, the display name or the email address. We can use any of those or any combination. I'm going to just start with the easiest one, first name, last name, and hit match. And it will go out and it will find any contacts that are already in the Autotask system that match first name, last name on users that are in Active Directory. From there, all I have to do is hit the link button, and at that point they're linked, and anytime that user is changed or modified in some way in the Active Directory environment, that change will copy over or occur to the counterpart in the Autotask system. Again, this is probably important for most of our users, just for the sake of, okay, I want to make sure that when I take Adam West out of Active Directory because he leaves the company, I want that contact to be gone too, or at least disabled, so that we know that we shouldn't be taking help desk calls from him anymore or whatever. So that's kind of the gist of what the bulk link does for you. Is it gives you this ability to go through and do a linking with all those existing customers or existing contacts, because we want to make sure we get those. It also creates a kind of an opposite report, which is how many users were in these OUs that I selected, but do not yet have contacts made. So these are the ones that we need to catch up. We need to do something with them. And so we can generate a report so that we can get a list of all those ones that need to be still need to be worked on. If there are any multiple matches, meaning, you know, I was doing first name, last name, it's possible to have more than 2 John Smiths in a company. So if they were more than one match, they would show up under multiple matches. In this case, there aren't any multiple matches. So kind of gives you a rough idea of what bulk linking is about. And, you know, it's just that onboarding tool to help you get started with your existing contacts. But probably the more important part is, what does the day-to-day look like? How do I get the contacts to show up in Autotask to start with? What are our capabilities for provisioning? So first thing, I'm going to go ahead and stop the service and start her back up, because I had made some changes. I added it so that it would pick up my my metadata fields. And so whenever I change any of the settings, I got to stop and start the service just so that it knows to take those new settings and start syncing those different fields that it wasn't syncing in the past. So do that real quick. And now what I'm going to do is drop over to Active Directory users and computers, because that's the interface where we do most of our work. That's where we're going to be letting you select which users are going to get synchronized and be able to set security levels on Client Portal if you choose to use the Client Portal, that sort of thing. So first thing, we can go into an individual user. So I could drop into Brad's account here. And you'll see that if I go into his property sheet, there is an Autotask tab here. So we insert a new tab into Active Directory users and computers. It is not a change to the schema, by the way. It is a separate DLL, so it doesn't change your schema in any way. But we do insert this tab, or have it appear, so that you have the ability to do these Autotask specific tasks. So if I wanted to create this user, one way I can create this user is simply by going in and enabling the user by checking that checkbox. And then if I choose to do so, I can also give him Client Portal access or Taskfire access, or even give him a custom security level within the Autotask system. I'm going to just give him basic access here.
This is where the password
just to show
is.
Well, this is actually if you want us to make a Client Portal user. We can create Client Portal users and never assign passwords to it. It'll just make a random password, and then you'll have to assign it from the Autotask side if you choose to do that. Or if you do choose to put the password sync in, the password sync would use whatever password it has learned about this user and pass that up at the time of creating the Client Portal user. So we can create Client Portal users with passwords or without passwords. That's up to you. So anyway, let's see, where was I? You check the checkbox here, you check the security level, whatever the security level you want is, you hit OK, and then that creates 2 transactions. You can monitor transactions. You don't have to. They're not. They will happen whether you look at them or not. But if you want to monitor them, you can jump over to the Management Studio and just refresh your screen, and you'll see that we have 2 new transactions: an enable user and an update user, both for Brad Foyle, the new user that I just authorized. It generally takes about 30 seconds to a minute for it to go through and start creating that user. You actually can set those settings here, how often you want it to go through and do transactions. That's kind of important because if you had a really big Active Directory with thousands and thousands of users, Autotask does limit you to the number of times per hour that you can hit their API. And so if you had thousands and thousands of users and you were updating them every 30 seconds, you could exceed the number of times that they will let you request data from the API. But in general, hitting it once a minute doesn't hurt anything. So with that said, what's happening over here is it's creating the user. Typically, it takes 1 or 2 cycles for it to complete for for Autotask to come back with a response to us to say, hey, I've created the new user. So once it's completed, you'll see that there'll be a check mark here and a time and date stamp. And that makes it so that if we were to go over to Autotask, and let's see, I'm going to go ahead and change the view here just so that it can show me all my users. And there's Brad. So Brad just got generated here. And you'll see that because I gave him client portal access, he has a check mark here. Had I not chosen a client portal access level, then there wouldn't be a check mark there. So that's kind of how we can create an individual one-off user. What we find that most of our customers do is rather than creating one-off users, what they do is they go and set up a security group. So if I just create a security group, I made the security group a little earlier today. It's just a normal security group. But if you go into security group, to the properties in the security group, you'll see that we have an Autotask tab that is similar to what we just saw on the user level. And on this Autotask tab, I can go and drop in and hit enable the Autotask. Again, I can give it a security level if I want to. So I'm going to make all these advanced users. They do require us to specify time, date, and number formats for the users. Any user that gets dropped into this group will be set up as a contact. Will also be set up with the security level that we've specified. If we specify one, and we'll get time, date, and number format as specified here. So we're going to hit OK. Again, you'll see that there'll be some new transactions over here, just telling us that we've now got a group that's going to be used for Autotask purposes. And that's processed already. So now if I wanted to go in here and grab a couple of users, I could add some users to the group. So we'll drop in Anthony, and we'll grab Angela. And once we put them in there, hit OK. And we'll see that now we've got add member events because there have been some members added to that group. So most of our customers use security groups in this manner, just dropping in all of the users that they choose to have made into contacts into any security group. We've even got a couple customers that have set up domain users, the built-in domain users user group as their security group for purposes of making contacts. And so every time that there's somebody added to domain users, it automatically creates the contact. So simple as that. Now you did mention some things about the need to use OUs, and so I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about our OUs and OU processing once these get done here. So it's created one of my members at this point. Should be making the other one any second. All right, there's Anthony and Angela and Brad. Those are all the ones we just created. And you'll see that, we brought across email addresses because that was one of the fields that we selected that we wanted to synchronize across. So it's kind of an idea of the sort of things that it brings across. Let's see if I can drill into this user's account just to show you the rest of the fields. So yeah, brought across a phone number and an email address for this user based on our synchronization. It also brought across the accounting department, they call it user defined field when I set up that user. Because that's coming from Active Directory. So that's kind of an example of what it looks like when we provision a user from a group. Now I'll jump into OUs real quick, tell you a little bit about OUs. We have the ability at an OU level to also specify some IDSync attributes. We can actually go in and configure an OU as if it were an entirely separate company. So if you choose to do so, you can actually override the settings that we put into this connection setting. You'll see these screens look almost the same, and you can specify different Autotask companies. So you can treat each OU, if you choose to do so, as an entirely separate company and actually post different OUs into different companies in Autotask, if that's helpful for you to be able to do so. And again, each OU can be treated separately. You can have different fields that are being synced for metadata purposes. You can sync different UDF fields for each OU. So we treat OUs kind of like they're their own separate universe that can be, or their own separate Active Directory that can be used for purposes of mapping to different locations inside of Autotask. And we have one more way of mapping things in Autotask. Again, if you've got any companies that let's say they don't have a really structured Active Directory, but rather they have different departments that you want to have listed as different companies in Autotask. Like the accounting department has their own company in Autotask, and the marketing department has their own company in Autotask. We've run into that situation at times, and so what we've done is we've made another way of splitting up where your data goes in Autotask simply by going and providing an account override where you can select a field inside of Active Directory. You could make this company, you could make this department, you can use any Active Directory field that is associated with a user record. You can set a field value. So I could say, if it's accounting, I want that to go to Autotask Company 1111. And if it's IT, I want it to go to 2222. And then that makes it so that anytime that this AD field is filled in with this value, when we go to create a contact for that customer or for that AD user, it will be created in the account, the Autotask account that is specified in this third field. So we make it so that you can map those things to different companies inside of Autotask, trying to make it very flexible. You can use account overrides, you can use OUs, you can use a combination of those so that you can get your contacts exactly where you want them. So I think that covers most of the aspects of how this system works. Marty, can you think of anything that might have left out, or anything anything else that I should cover before we turn it back over to you?
No, I looks pretty good to me, Larry. Nate,
okay.
Any questions you want to ask while we still got this software up?
Yeah. So since I have like 75 different clients I have to go out and grab, if I have this installed on our server, can I go out and grab other clients' Active Directory contact info through LDAP? With the software, do I have to install the software at every location?
At this point, it's designed so that it has to be inside the Active Directory where we're pulling the information.
Okay.
I understand the question you asked, but unfortunately, no, we don't have the ability to go out through LDAP and pull that information yet. That actually might be something that could be done in the future, because we've recently designed an AD to AD integration that does utilize LDAP to go out to foreign domains, but that's not currently how this works.
Okay. And then can you set it up so that deleting users in Active Directory could delete them in Autotask, or no? If not, it's okay. I'm just curious.
No, we can we can disable them. We can't delete them because the problem is that in Autotask, you may have ticket history or configuration history, that sort of thing. They're all tied to the contact, and so they won't let us delete the contact.
All right. All right, and then if if changes occur, I don't know how often they occur. If like users don't change very often, do you guys have an option to send a report out to a certain email address? If changes occur.
Oh, you mean for when?
Yeah, like I say
when
I add a
users
user.
are added.
Yeah, does it send out? So like we set it up so like if say one of our guys adds a user, it tells the account manager that a user was added. You guys have that functionality?
We don't, but it is actually we've again going to our AD to AD connector. We've actually recently built something similar to that. We
Okay.
actually made a syslog. We actually made a ability to record what's being added and what's changing via syslog, and that might be extensible to this, but currently no, we don't have the ability to proactively send out emails. It's one of the challenges or it's one of the more challenging subjects is being able to send out emails, because then you've got to have access to an SMTP server that will allow you to relay that message out. And so many things get blocked if you do that.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Everything is logged for what it is worth. There is actually a really fairly detailed log file that occurs throughout the process to let us know everything that's happening on the server. But you'd have to send yourself a copy of the log or something like that if you wanted to diagnose what was happening. The other part of it, of course, is the SQL Server itself has all of this information on it as well. All the transactions that you're seeing here are being logged within the SQL Server. So you could query the SQL Server as well if you wanted to see adds, removes, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Level 1 service to your customers. All right, and so we want a trained engineer on your side who knows how to do setup and do operations. All right, so we want to provide help desk to the MSP should they need some guidance, but we want to get at least your first customer up and running, and we use that as a device to train whoever your lead engineer is. Right. 2, 3, 4 desktop sharing sessions to get you through both the training and the deployment of your first customer. After that, you should then budget probably an hour per customer to get them up and running.